In the year 2089, the Project Prometheus began with the developments of two archaeologists, both Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway, when they worked with Wayland Industries after their discovery of the Engineer's hidden star map invitation across ancient human civilizations. After mass support from Wayland Industries and the CEO-founder of the company, Sir Peter Wayland himself, Project Prometheus was established, and the USCSS Prometheus was developed. In today's video, I'll be exploring the various crew a part of the Prometheus expedition in today's collective character catalogue video, with characters I didn't feel needed their own whole video for themselves. S. Barnes was a mechanic under the serial number END 6924, hired by Wayland Corporation in order to repair the various vehicles and equipment being utilised by the mission and crew of the USCSS Prometheus, such as the NR6S and RT ATVs. Not much is known about Barnes, however we do know that eventually he is killed in the ensuing chaos that followed the mutated Firefields rampage through the crew bay of the Prometheus. Ravel was one of two co-pilots that served under the command of Captain Idris Yannick on the USCSS Prometheus during its expedition to LV-223 and doubled as the primary navigator. Ravel was born presumably on Earth in the year 1950 and was first worked as an FTL licensed commercial mining and mapping navigator/pilot. He eventually takes up employment with Wayland, and he served alongside Yannick for 7 years before joining the crew of the Prometheus expedition. After spending 2 years in hypersleep, Ravel and the other crew members are awakened, and as the ship finally reaches LV-223, Ravel, unaware of the actual intentions of the mission due to it being classified, begins to take bets with his friend in the crew and also his co-pilot, Chance. He takes a bet from Chance that the mission is a terraforming operation. However, soon Elizabeth Shaw and Holloway reveal that they were actually trying to seek out the mysterious creators of humanity known as the Engineers. Despite later finding an engineer atmospheric terraformer, and Chance trying to cash in on the bet, Ravel holds to the fact that the reason the mission was sent here was to search for Martians, and not actually to terraform themselves. Ravel never actually leaves the ship and instead remains either on deck or in his personal quarters. Throughout the mission, he is present to observe the first excursion of the away team to LV-223. He witnesses Milburn and Firefield get trapped in the temples of LV-223, and then the second excursion to get Milburn and Firefield that resulted in Milburn's dead body being found, and later the death of Dr. Holloway, and many other various crew members when Firefield's mutated body returned with a vengeance at the ship's cargo bay doors. Later, after it is revealed that Sir Peter Wayland was aboard the ship and wanted to converse with an engineer that was revealed to be alive, Ravel remains with Yannick, Chance and Meredith Vickers aboard while the rest of the remaining crew travels to greet the last engineer. Sadly, almost all of the crew perish at the hand of their angry god, and the final survivor of the group, Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, informs Yannick and the others on the Prometheus of the engineers' intentions to wipe out the human population of Earth, and that they must do whatever they can to stop this. Yannick, Ravel and Chance all accept the fact that the Prometheus was not equipped with weapons, and instead they collectively decide to give their last breaths to save their homeworld, whilst Meredith Vickers makes for the lifeboat. Chance was the other of the two co-pilots that served under the command of Yannick on the Prometheus during the expedition to LV-223. Chance was born on Earth in the year 2055, and Chance eventually obtained employment in the United States Air Force as an FTL licensed pilot and took part in many military operations, notably in 2078 known as the Conflict of Z-11. He served for a further 3 years before being honourably discharged in the year 2081. Shortly after, Chance obtained employment with Wayland Industries as a pilot and served under Captain Yannick for around 9 years before they took part in Project Prometheus. After spending 2 years in hypersleep, Chance and the other crew members are awakened to the ship on LV-223, just above LV-223. Knowing his friend, Ravel, and himself were unaware of the actual intentions of the mission as it was actually classified, he makes bets with his friend that the mission is a terraforming operation. However, as previously explained, this does not fan out too well for him. Chance only really leaves the ship once when he travels with the other crew members to find the missing Milburn and Fifield. Besides this, he tends to remain on deck or in his personal quarters, and throughout the mission he is present to observe basically all the same events as his friend Ravel whilst aboard the ship. Chance remains with Yannick, Ravel and Meredith Vickers aboard whilst the rest of the crew go to meet the engineer. Eventually, Yannick, Ravel and Chance all accept the fact that the Prometheus was not equipped with the weapons capable of taking down the engineer vessel on its way back to Earth, and he and the rest collectively decide to give their last breaths to save their homeworld, whilst again Meredith Vickers makes a beeline for the lifeboat. R. Shepard was a mechanic under the serial number ENA 2742, who was hired by Weyland Corp to maintain ground transport equipment as well as the EVA suits aboard the USCSS Prometheus during its expedition to LV-223. He was presumably born on Earth, and after spending 2 years in hypersleep, Shepard along with the other crews are awakened and given the details of their mission by Dr. Holloway, Shaw and the company representative Meredith Vickers. Shepard along with fellow crew members Jackson, Furtick and Taplow later attempted to kill a mutated Fifield much later on the mission, who was affected by a black pathogen that had been discovered in the temples of the moon. Fifield began to run rampant on the Prometheus hangar bay, driven by a blind rage fueled by his horrific mutations. The crew attempted to kill the violent creature by shooting him multiple times with pistols, but the mutated Fifield proves to be too agile, fast, and resilient. Shepard is killed by Fifield when he is thrown against a transport. Cian Tragian was a medical officer under serial number SM2618, who was responsible for Peter Weyland's medical care aboard the USCSS Prometheus, and was one of the few individuals to know of Weyland's presence aboard the ship during its time of the mission. He was presumably born on Earth and eventually became a medical officer, only to die during the process of fulfilling his duties to Weyland on the mission to LV-223 in 2093. L. Taplow was a mechanic under the serial number EN8170, who was hired by Weyland Industries to maintain the crew's EVA suits along with the ground transports aboard the USCSS Prometheus. He was presumably born on Earth, and Taplow along with his fellow crew Jackson, Furtick and Shepard were in the ship's hangar when a mechanic discovered Fifield's body outside the hangar door. When this mechanic opened the door and walked over to investigate, Fifield had mutated horribly as a result of contact with the black pathogen discovered on the moon in the temples of the engineers, and goes on to brutally murder crew member after crew member. Taplow attempted to kill the mutated Fifield by burning him with a flamethrower unit. However, the beast that was once one of his fellow crew members managed to climb on top of the roof of one of the Prometheus's group transports and leaped down from the vehicle. Fifield then landed on top of Taplow and proceeded to smash his helmet in, killing him. Vladimir Furtick was a mercenary under the serial number SE9281 and was hired by the Weyland Corporation to provide security aboard the USCSS Prometheus. Presumably born on Earth, Furtick eventually was hired by a company as a security officer in Africa during a time of civil unrest, and was said to be involved in at least one major conflict there somewhere in the late 21st century. At some point, he is hired by Weyland Industries and joins to provide security for the crew aboard the USCSS Prometheus during its voyage to LV-223. Furtick, along with Jackson, Shepard and Taplow, later attempt to kill a mutated Fifield affected by the black pathogen, who was running rampant in the ship's hangar. Furtick shoots him multiple times with a pistol, and when the guns prove ineffective to kill the beast, Furtick tries to protect himself in the RT-01 transport, but is hit in the back with an axe by Fifield and pulled out of the vehicle and killed. James Embry is a mechanic aboard the ship of the Prometheus and was hired in order to keep the NR6S and the RT-ATVs running and maintained. Presumably born on Earth, Embry is on the bridge as the Prometheus approaches LV-223, and after the crew emerge from their 2-year-long stasis, he is seen sharing a meal with the rest of the crew. He is later seen monitoring Milburn and Fifield in the alien temple, however, eventually leaves at the request of Yannick, who remains to keep an eye on the two. James Embry eventually dies aboard the Prometheus with Yannick, Chance and Ravel in their honourable sacrifice to halt the engineers' advance towards Earth. Corporal B. Jackson was a mercenary under the serial number SE7256 and was an actual former military operative based in the EU and UK, who was eventually hired by Weyland Industries to act as a security officer aboard the US CSS Prometheus during its expedition to LV-223 in 2093. He was presumably born on Earth, and as his role demanded, he was in charge of the security detail aboard the vessel and took this passion very seriously and with the utmost obedience to his commanders. Jackson, while quite loyal to the company and specifically to his employer, Peter Weyland. Assigned for the Prometheus's expedition security, he was trained in the use of small arms fire and never hesitated to use them if ordered to. Despite his desirable physical traits, he could also be quite cold and distant to those he did not like, such as the scientists he was supposed to protect. Being on Weyland's payroll, he also could be quite ruthless towards other beings if his boss requested him to be. During the away team's preparations to explore the temples discovered on LV-223, Jackson armed himself with a flamethrower and a pistol and was ordered not to by Elizabeth Shaw, under the rationale that it being a research mission they would not need these things, to which he begrudgingly complies but gives her a slight warning of the possibility of consequences. After the Prometheus's crew's first expedition to the engineered temple, he helped David retrieve Holloway and Shaw after they were trapped by the silica storm outside the Prometheus. Much later, the mutated Fifield makes his appearance known, and Jackson, alongside his fellow mercenaries Furtick, Shepard and Taplow, they together attempt to put an end to the beast's rampage in the ship's hangar by firing at him multiple times with pistols, but this only aggravated him. Eventually the creature kills the other 3 crew members, whilst Jackson and Yannick, with much effort, manage to avoid suffering the same fate when Fifield is finally put down during the slaughter. After it is revealed that Sir Peter Weyland was aboard the ship and wished to talk to the last surviving engineer, Jackson accompanied the away team with Weyland to speak with his god. He helps escort Weyland and the team to where all hell eventually breaks loose, after the engineer witnesses the cruelty of humanity when Jackson is ordered to silence Shaw by Weyland's request. He does so by striking her in her fresh wound with his weapons stock. The engineer, over this freak show, decapitated David's head and used it to kill Weyland, then proceeded to kill crew members Cait Ford and Jackson. Now being the last man standing, fired his shotgun at the engineer, however its exosuit easily absorbed the rounds and Jackson was subsequently punched by the engineer, dropping him to the floor and rupturing his internal organs. The engineer then picked him up off the ground and threw him against a pillar, snapping his spine and killing him almost instantly. J. Wallace was a mechanic under the serial number SA7625 and was hired by the Weyland Corporation to fix and repair vehicles aboard the USCSS Prometheus. Wallace was presumably born on Earth, and during the mission on LV-223, Wallace was present when Yannick noticed Firefield's monitor was outside the Prometheus hangar door. Barnes opened the door. What followed, though, was an unnamed mechanic being brutally murdered by a mutated Firefield, and Firefield smashed his helmet as Wallace watched in absolute horror. Wallace bolted in an attempt to escape the beast. However, Firefield threw him off a platform and jumped on him, crushing his chest. Wallace was finally killed when Firefield smashes his face with his clenched fists. Cait Ford was an EMT medic that was hired by Weyland Industries to take care of the crew of the USCSS Prometheus' health needs and recovery during the voyage to LV-223. Ford was born in the year 2049 on Earth, presumably in Scotland, as she did have that accent. Ford would eventually go on in her early life to assist refugees in the United East. Her experience and expertise drove her to Project Prometheus, and which she applied for the emergency medic position. She was interviewed directly by Meredith Vickers and eventually gained the job. Ford was eventually hired and given the designation as the ship's physician and EMT medic. Her work with Dr. Shaw on the alien head would place her education experience along a number of medical, biological, and anatomical sciences. Her place on the elite crew of the USCSS Prometheus also meant that she was the best qualified individual in whatever area her expertise was needed. After spending 2 years in hypersleep, Ford along with the other crew members were awakened and debriefed on the mission's goals. Once the Prometheus had landed on LV-223, a team consisting of Ford, Shaw, Holloway, David, Milburn, Jackson, and Firefield entered and begun to explore an artificial structure near the landing site. Whilst inside the pyramid, the team came across a water-related terraforming system that made the air within the temple perfectly breathable. Ford commented that this atmosphere was even cleaner than Earth's. As the team made their way deeper into the tunnels, David activated a hologram that led them to the preserved remains of a decapitated engineer, the head of which had been discovered in a room behind the door that severed it. Due to the team's tampering, the environment inside the room dramatically began to change from the atmospheric changes, forcing Ford and Shaw to isolate and preserve the engineer's head for research. Whilst the team rushed back to the Prometheus to avoid an approaching windstorm, Ford later assisted Shaw in examining the engineer's head, during which they attempted to activate the head's nervous system in order to awaken dormant neurons in the brain tissue. Now, while it succeeded at first, it shortly went sour and caused the engineer's head to experience a large amount of new cellular growth and mutations, as the black pathogen discovered in the temple began to work its horrific magic. Much later, Dr. Shaw experienced the loss of Holloway, and Ford is instructed to place her in hypersleep due to her becoming infected from an intimate relationship with Holloway, as he had become infected with some unknown pathogen. Ford tried to awaken the unconscious Shaw by slapping her cheeks repeatedly, only to be knocked out by Shaw by surprise. Ford later accompanied Peter Weyland and his team to awaken and meet the last engineer within the LV-223 temple complex. The engineer reacted with great hostility towards the team and began to kill them one by one. In her shock and horror, Ford froze where she stood, allowing the engineer to deliver a brutal blow to the chest, crushing her sternum and sending her flying backwards onto the floor, where she died within seconds. An unnamed mechanic was also a part of the mission aboard the USCSS Prometheus during the ship's voyage to LV-223. While his name is not known, we simply know that he was a fellow mechanic in the crew that was presumably born on Earth and working on maintaining and repairing the ground vehicles. He was killed by the mutated Firefield during the attack that occurred in the ship's hangar bay. Before I go, I just wanted to let you guys know about the merch store called ACHERON's Colonial Marketplace. Here you can pick up a variety of ACHERON and alien themed merch from 3 distinct product lines, including shirts, hoodies, mugs, blankets, stickers, bags, and even phone cases. So if you want to support the channel and look good doing it, pick up some ACHERON merch. But what other videos would you guys like to see? If you have any ideas or have any questions you would like answered, please meet me down in the comments. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like and go check out Project ACHERON on Twitter and Discord. If you want to support me further, you can become a patron where you can get access to early and behind the scenes content, the monthly and Alien Day giveaways, as well as the patron only engraved set of items. I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Until then, this is Project ACHERON, signing off.